What's going on YouTube? It's your boy Hey Heinous, FOF Squad, Facts Over Feelings. Keep your feelings at the door so we can get to the facts. Alright, and this is the last installment of this series right here. And I wanted to provide some more insight on what his charges were. We just say we gloss over a lot of these things, and a lot of people say, oh well, yeah, mail fraud, and what was it? And like we said, we're not here to give you surface level information. We dig deep. We do our due diligence. So with that being said, let's get right into it. First I want to say let's go. It's going to bring us back over some information, but it's necessary to touch on it. Okay, so 1919, we know when he started the Black Star Line. All right, Black Star Line was a corporation that he wanted to esteem to be just like the White Star Line. Okay, and the White Star Line was originally it had its roots in London, of course, and around 1902 it was bought by J.P. Morgan for like $32 million. Okay, and the White Star Line is what built the Titanic. And that ship sank. We already know about the story of the Titanic. But what's interesting is like we said, this is what you have to understand. They will, for just the purposes of esteeming themselves and being superior, they will gloss over some of the most important and some of the most damning evidence, if you will, that really shows you how callous these individuals were. And what do I mean by that? If one of the things that they did in the early 20th century and in like the early 1900s, and when they were shipbuilding, was building now with what was called iron hulls. They used to use wooden hulls, okay? But these iron hulls that they were using on their ships was throwing the magnets off, was throwing their compass off. This is why their navigation skills were hampered, and then they were crashing these big ships into icebergs and stuff because they would rather be, having people on there looking all elegant and acting like they're rich and high and mighty, and not taking into consideration that, this might cause an accident where lives would be lost inevitably, and still didn't care, because they were still making money. People would take the risk. This company still was a success, regardless of the fact that people's security was in question when they were traveling across the Atlantic. And, specifically for the Titanic, that individual, Ismay, I believe his name was, he wanted to, continue to keep the Titanic. They say the excuse is because he wanted to cross the Atlantic in 6 days, and he promised that's why he wanted to maintain the speed that the Titanic had. But the reality of it is that your navigation was thrown off. That's why you were hitting these icebergs, and but they didn't want to. They don't want you to garner that, or to get the idea that they were making those type of mistakes. That's why, like I said, but it's all in hindsight. I'm pretty sure Garvey probably couldn't see that when he wanted to emulate his business after the White Star Line. But in my opinion, the steps that he was taking from a business perspective seemed to me that as much as he was an individual who championed us making better decisions economically, that didn't translate into a lot of the business practices, in as far as how he was running the Black Star Line. Everybody knew. Nobody, even black historians, would tell you it was a huge failure. And it was a huge failure because first and most importantly, like we said, in 1919 and 1920, he raised $800,000. Now, you and I all know, we ain't got to be expert economists to know that $800,000 goes a long way in the early 1900s, especially at this time when it's backed by gold. All right, so that's critical for your understanding. Now, with that being said, what was he buying? Old, dilapidated ships, World War I ships. And if you think for one odd second that we didn't have black men and women that were adept at shipbuilding, I don't care how big the project could have been. That's how you put back into the people who put in, not just getting in this idea like, okay, well, you buying $5 in stock into a company. All right. And then so when you purchase that old ship, who were you purchasing that old ship from? So the thing is, what happened was, we know that J. Edgar Hoover at the Bureau of Investigation, which eventually ended up turning into the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, obviously, he ended up sending 3 undercover operatives up in there, and this is the first 3 black men that are hired in the FBI, but he ends up sending them, to infiltrate Garvey's organization. And then what they find him on is, mail fraud. And the mail fraud comes about because he was selling stock in a ship he didn't buy yet. All right, he was calling it the SS Phyllis Wheatley, and it was actually a ship called the Orion. Okay, and he didn't purchase it yet, and he was more or less manipulating people into buying stock into something he hadn't even purchased yet or didn't secure. All right, so they got him on mail fraud, and then, he was supposed to serve 5 years, but he ended up only serving 3, or 33 months, if you will. There go your number 33. All right, and then who pardons him? Calvin Coolidge, the president. That's how his sentence is commuted. Okay? Now, I don't know about you, but I'm just saying, like, if they get a nigga on something and then he that radical, you would assume that he'd be doing the whole 5 years, but he gets pardoned by the president? Okay, and like I said, what is important for your understanding is that not one Black Star Line ship ever went to Africa. Wasn't that the whole purpose of it? Now, see, y'all was on me like, hey, what is the connection between him and me going and dying in London and West Kensington, which is an affluent society for people who got bread. You understand what I'm saying? So you laughed at me with that. But then I'm thinking, like, wasn't the whole purpose for him to do was to be able to give Black African Americans the opportunity to go to Africa? And you never did? And who knows if he ever went himself? This is what I'm saying. That's what people ain't telling you. See, they're not going to the numbers, what was made. And we didn't see any improvement in our people, especially considering the fact that did it just so happen by chance that this dude, okay, he gets out, and goes to London, and that's the perfect place to be, because what happens in the 1930s? The Depression. Stock market crashes. And what was he selling? Stock. Man, come on, bro. Y'all not fucking with me, man. Y'all not fucking with me, dude. You understand what I'm saying? Like I said, I may point to W.E.B. Du Bois. We know W.E.B. Du Bois was an agent too, but this is what we're stuck with. We're always stuck between arguing and either celebrating or defending or tearing down the lesser of two evils that we're given. And I may quote him, I take from these people ideas because, like, one thing I do agree with W.E.B. Du Bois, it's about intellectual currency, the trade-off of ideas. If you can give me the idea, I can give a hell about the rest of your message. Give me the right idea. So I understand where some people are coming from. Maybe what he did in terms of, galvanizing the Black spirit, giving us an example of what we were capable of doing on a collective level. That is one thing I champion. That's one thing I give him credit for. But to sit up here and say that his motives were pure, you got to be out your damn mind. And it's emblematic, and it is what we see from the individuals who now see the genius in what he had done. And they're doing the same thing to you. And isn't that ironic that this individual who peddles these names has still not given you what he is championed for so long, which is so critical, which is the cornerstone of his work, of his platform, and yet he hasn't produced it in any concrete terms? Now, this was the same thing. He running around and he telling Black people, like, I want y'all to go back to Africa. They become Garveyist. His membership reaches almost 4 million at its height. But like we said, due to mismanagement, due to him not investing, whether it be in the brothers and sisters who could be able to build these ships, because you must know that if you could allocate money and they're allowing you to purchase these ships, then build a shipyard to where these brothers and sisters can, use their skills to then, garner more of that. But as you see, how many individuals can you name? And I'm willing for you to get the research, and I'm willing to bow down if you get it. That families that had profited off of stock bought in the Black Star Line, huh? You don't know, you can't, because it had crumbled, it had fell apart. You don't buy stock in a company for it to fall apart. You understand what I'm saying? But if your business practices, or if the measures you take as far as investing in your company, if the owner is not going to invest in the company, if the owner is going to buy outdated ships, where in the hell are you going to take that business? You got me buying stock in the business that you're not even taking seriously? You garnering $800,000 and the first thing you do is buy an old World War I ship? Come on, man. Then his others, one that crashed in the Hudson Bay, where I think one guy was killed or something like that. And then the other one, he was telling people he was going to get that he never acquired, and he was selling that it was going to be the SS Phyllis Wheatley, and it was really the Orion. And then he take his money, settle in Jamaica after he get released from prison, and take his ass to West Kensington, London. once again, dies in an affluent society. And then that's when, after he dies, they send his body back to Jamaica, and he's known as, the first hero of Jamaica. I mean, come on, man, if you believe all of that. Like I said, it may have been great for the countenance of a people to understand how far we could take something, how serious we can become. Like our collective energy could actually accomplish this. I mean, we've seen that in Tulsa, Oklahoma. We've seen it in the Rosewood. We've seen it multiple times. When the dollar circulates within our community multiple times, and we are our own doctors, we are our own lawyers, we are our own teachers, we understand how dynamic of a people we can be. Nobody is discounting that. Nobody, like I said, is trying to take away from the progress that he made in terms of that. But what I am telling you is that when the evidence is out there and you look at it like you look at it in the spiritual realm. They do the same thing. We love these people for their instruction, and it seems just as, I mean, you can't, when you look at, man, when you turn on the service of TD Jakes or Creflo Dollar, can you tell they acting? But you gonna sit up here and tell me they need the $1 million jets and the multi-million-dollar mansions? Are you literally telling me they need that? That's the boule. What you have to understand, there's a guy writing a book right now and that's talking about it. He is telling you, he told you, it don't even matter how much money that you think you got. We allow only certain individuals in too as well. It's just not the money that gets you access. It's the mindset. And the mindset can only come from being a part of these organizations. That's what, you have to understand that, man. They're not giving anybody any power on that level unless they help to facilitate it. And so that's what like I said, that evidence right there, it just wasn't to what, when I wanted to jump into the hardcore information, I wanted to bring it all back to show you, it is you can see at the end of the day, if none of these, if we're not stopping the progress that's being made by the powers that be in terms of restructuring an image that will justify the extermination of a whole group of people, then come on, man, it wouldn't matter where you would have migrated to. Because we're no much more, we're not that closer to liberating our image here than anybody in Africa. And you think they say, oh, well, Africans, hey, America's here. If you've never been, what images do you know that are being pumped to them? Just like you're being pumped an image of them. And so, like we know, it's always been a weapon. We go back to understanding that they understood that it was a weapon, smallpox being one of them. Like they talked about, this is what decimated the Indian civilizations along with syphilis. It just wasn't one occasion of them giving them some blankets. No, every time that they came in contact with them, they dropping like flies. Millions of them. Like we talked about, Bartolome de las Casas wrote about this in his book, 1552. We've already discussed that. You see what I'm saying? So these individuals knew who they, the idea is to get the population down to a number that to them, allows this to work and allows this to be constructed in a seamless manner and without any more resistance. And it will finally be at a level where I wouldn't say that they would be able to breathe easy, but they definitely wouldn't have to worry about your ass. And this is what I'm trying to get you to understand. This is not, these are the facts. This is how this goes, man. Because like we talked about, one thing that these brothers had the privilege of being next to was those who were the next would create the next new wave of thinking. And this state at which we're at, this was inevitable. And it's all because they're controlling the science, which in turn will control the worldview. You see what I'm saying? So this is when you have to observe all of these things. We have to say, well, okay, yeah, Garvey just showed, he showed, he had a lot of passion, and he showed initiative. He became industrious, and he was there to do for our people. And he showed that, you can get a lot of black people together. And we have to understand the reason why you got a lot of black people together was based off economics. It was the Black Star Line which attracted people to Garveyism. They wanted a piece of the pie, man. And he knew that the hottest thing going right now at that time was buying stock. Buying stock in companies. But he had no intention whatsoever of strengthening that company. Because if he did, he would have took the $800,000 he got from Negroes and would have spent that money better. Because like I said, it was backed by gold. Remember, they took the gold back, stopped back in the currency in 1933. You conveniently enough got out. See, man, this is not somebody who's like, oh man, this dude, he just reading a whole bunch of stuff and he just putting some stuff together, man. He got too much, you know. I know that's what people saying, but this is what we're not supposed to do. We're not supposed to put it all together. These guys were educated. Garvey was educated in economics. And what would if economics would have, you know, economics, the perfect place to be educated in economics is in London, because who controls all the banks in London? The Rothschilds. What did the Rothschilds say? Let me control your money. I don't care who makes the laws. This is what these guys were infatuated with. He told you in so many different ways. Think deeply. He said he was infatuated with the White Star Line. Okay, so this is what I tell brothers all the time. In some way, your mentality can be tainted by Europeans. It may not be spiritually, but like we see a lot of brothers, they might not follow no white Jesus, but they'll die for the dollar. Okay? This is what you have to understand. In some area, like what we said, once again, we reiterate, they control every area of life activity, like Dr. Francis Walton told you about: economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, sex, religion, and war. So, you know, like I said, it's a God in every one of those areas. All right? Are you with me? So you think I'm playing around with you niggas like I don't do my research, like I'm just putting a whole bunch of information together? Look at the timelines. That's why it's so important to understand the dates. You know, at the very least, like we talked about, like I will say it again, I don't submit to everything that W.E.B. Du Bois said, because we know he was an agent too. He was part of the Boule. He was part of them Greek fraternities. But at least he had the decency. He was a Pan-Africanist too as well. At least he had the decency to die in Ghana. This man, he had a ship line that never even went to Africa. Then he himself is not even known to have ever gone to Africa. But he was telling you to do it, selling stock to you. He just wasn't telling you to do it, oh, well, you know, and then, you know, you buy into this company, a company that he's not putting no money into. He's buying old, dilapidated ships. So you do the math. You look at the time period. You look at everything that was in play, and then you do the math. Just like these preachers. Maybe because you love them so much, or you so used to hearing them, or you so used to going to their church, or you so used to their institutionalized thinking, or you so embedded in the institutionalized framework that you can't see it for what it is. I can't help that. It's the same thing like we see these Hotep hustlers doing right now. You're so in love with them, you can't see clearly. Is that my fault? Facts over feelings, nigga. That's not my fault. You understand what I'm saying? I'm ripping you niggas apart, man. You thought I was playing. I'm not playing with y'all, man. Oh, you go, oh, you hurt my feelings, man. You talking about Garvey? You ain't got the right. Wow. It's funny. They give you the right to talk about God, but we can't talk about none of these puppets. We can't talk about the elite. We can't talk about the Jews, but we can talk about God. We can make fun of God, but we can't make fun of the people who claim that they following God. That's deep to me, man. That makes them omnipotent. You know, you know, when you put these people in a bubble where they are immune to criticism, and it to me, that already makes me believe there's something wrong with that. There's something wrong with that. You understand what I'm saying? So I was covering all my bases, like I told people before. I was giving it bits and pieces, and I take it and I give it to you. I bring it back full circle, baby. You don't think that I just came with a little bit of evidence. I'm like, now that you notice and you look and you say, damn, I probably wasn't looking at it all like that. Yeah. Because rationally speaking, come on, telling you, it's just like, that's just like saying for real, and everything we love, we know this to be true. That's just like a brother, a sister, anybody sitting up here hollering black power, or you go off and you get with another race. You know, it doesn't look good. I don't care how passionate you may have been, but it just don't look good. You know what I'm saying? That's all I'm saying. It just don't look good. All the things that were in play. Like, if I'm passionate about my people, I'm telling you, if we got to build that bitch from scratch, if I'm into, you know, being a migrationist and I'm trying to get my people back to Africa because I feel like this is the best place we need to be, I'm not gonna send them on no rinky dinky ship. I know that. That's just hands down. And then the brother didn't even make one trip to Africa with his ship line, which, like they said, only lasted about 3 years because of mail fraud, because he was about to sell even more stock in the ship that he didn't even own yet. This is, man, come on, man. But they ain't telling you that in the history books. See, in every history book, only thing you're going to hear, Garvey, Pan-Africanist, migrationist, started Garveyism, yada, yada, yada. That's all we hear, man. So, of course, you going to get upset when a brother like me dig a little bit deeper. You upset? You mad? You mad, ain't you? I don't, man. I'm sorry, man. Dude, what could I do? Because I'm not finna, like we talked about before, man, we can't allow these things to happen. And we talk about how the steps that they take in order to ensure that this is a generational frame or generational expression of work. This is nothing, has nothing to do with you thinking that, oh well, yeah, they had a time period where they were going through this and they were going. No, that's how they want you to think that they were thinking. Because then it'll have you in debates, it'll have you in thinking in 50 different for 50 different outcomes. They don't do that, man. There's a clear and cut plan that they had once they understood exactly what was going on with them, because the best experience to garner was from your own personal experience. They seen what the biological weapon was doing to them. They were scared of it. At first they called it miasma. They just thought something was creeping through the air, killing them. They were that obsessed with and not to mention you compound that idea or you compound their stress with not being able to be in regions where the temperature was 75 degrees all year round. It was causing madness, but somehow still able to attain power. you know. And some people say, "Oh well, the black man helped to civilize the white man." How? Where? When? We ain't. Where? Where? What good of? What job have we? I don't see it. I don't see it. And what's so incredible, like I was saying before, with people who talk about war, and we say, and I think I mentioned this in the last video, when you talk about war, you talk about all these things, that the reason for the debt that the United States at its conception was in debt from the American Revolution. All the money that was owed. It takes a lot of money and resources in order to go to war. And war, like we talked about, is the big reason as to why there can be inflation or rise in prices. And we've already discussed that. So this is what we have to understand is that a lot of people were put themselves in position, and they got that position by being a part of the boule to be able to capitalize off of you, because they knew what could pull your heartstrings. They knew what could be the catalyst that was necessary to get you evolved into a system that eventually is designed and has always been designed to fail. Look at all the many times they talk about the financial panics, the financial panic of 1879, a financial panic of 1919. What is all these panics for? They can't never get right talking about America was great when you were always unstable, and your market was always unstable, clearly because you had people behind the scenes controlling the market, and it always had this clear and present danger mentality of breakdown. And it destabilizes a nation of people and has them on edge as you compound their life with even more pressures and stressors. It makes for a very volatile situation that eventually will prep you for understanding that this is what will end all of this. Because you will always, like I said, they condition you for having a desire for order, and somehow somebody bringing peace or coming up with resolutions to a lot of the problems that they have created themselves. But they, like I said, they're already aware of the end game. Already aware of the end game. You have to be aware of it. You understand what I'm saying? And since you were not, you can get led astray because you get caught up in how emotional the set of events or the set of circumstances may be. And that's what makes it hard. We've all done that. Our culture is very powerful. This culture is very powerful. You can get caught up in the moment, and then sometimes you are able to see exactly what it is, what's going on in hindsight, but we don't have no time for that. We really don't. And that's what I'm telling you is that I just said all that to, I know some at some points in time again, because I get off into I'm thinking constantly to make sure that I don't miss anything. Because I always, want to give you guys as much information as possible. But these are that's what I had researched, and it just jumped out at me, and it made me realize that anytime that these brothers who may be a part and partial to the conspiracy, they give you codes, and we have to understand that, like they said, the world operates in signs and symbols, and anything and anyone can be a symbol. It's your job to be able to decode with that sort of understanding. A lot of people that they use and put in front of you are representative of the mindset that they have, and that's the reason why they champion these individuals the way that they do. But when you dig and dig deeper, then you realize, okay, well, as passionate as these people are, and as dedicated these people had seemed, then how is it that there's no progress? We remain aloof to that, even like I said, even to this day, and the spiritual side of things. When you see these mega churches, you're like, how are there any poor people around when this guy could afford 30-40 million dollar jets? There's no way you can tell me that there's not, even if it's just one black community, if you spend 30 to 40 million dollars in that community. Come on, man. That's you couldn't imagine Jesus being these preachers, dude. If you can, then dude, just don't subscribe to my channel. Don't ever listen to me no more. I don't mess with you. If you honestly think that if these people were care about you the way that your savior, that you say care about people, if they are if they can't mimic that to a 10th degree, then I really don't understand what you're talking about. Because it really don't take much, man. From as many resources as these cats was making, that they were getting from our people, I just really don't see what, and it was a up for grabs thing. You had the industrialists, they were at that time getting a lot of people to invest in their business on the European side, and then you had the Boule, who was getting us to invest in ventures on the other side. And we were buying into this movement. But is it not ironic, like I said before, that those who bought into it the most, or were the ones who were peddling it, the ones who were spearheading it, they didn't even go themselves? Not one trip? Even if you just rented one, you didn't even have to buy one. You didn't take one trip? Man, bro, I don't know, man. I don't know. Now y'all can you can argue all day and make excuses for the man, but 800 grand, a lot of money in 1 year, bro. That's just 1 year. He was doing it for 3 years, man. He was doing it for 3 years, dude. Easily a multimillionaire. When, like I said, when money was backed by gold. You understand? He went to school for money, basically. When you say economics, he went to school for money. That's what he went to school for. And then that's what he said, captivated by what he had learned in school, also from, wanting to emulate the White Star Line and what he had seen Europeans being able to do, in addition to Booker T. Washington and his perspective of, us, creating this separatist idea, like, okay, we can get our own thing going. And he bought wholeheartedly into that, supposedly. I mean, that was his platform. But yet, like I said, maybe he was just telling you exactly what it was. Like, we supposed to be able to get money. We could do it just as big as what these Europeans is doing. But earlier, it was only one person eating. A few people eating. It wasn't, if the company, like we talked about, if it was designed for that company to, create, to really have value, then he really would have been investing a lot more, man. That's just how it goes, dude. If you got a business right now, even somebody tell you that when you start your YouTube channel only gonna go so far as much as you invest in it. If you only put up a video every 6-7 months, I don't think you're gonna grow all that fast. So when you take $800,000 and you go buy an old World War I ship, bro, bro, come on, man. I'm not feeling that. I'm not buying that. So, you can take that how you want to. This is the part 4 and the last all. I'm done with it. You know what I'm saying? I mean, if you're going to sit up there and say or develop or craft an excuse for the man, then go ahead. I'm used to that. And I'm used to people sitting up there talking about it's not enough evidence because you can insinuate, but come on, man, you take all those variables, and it's always been hints to that, and then you can see what are the effects of it. The stock market crash, people already knew they were getting individuals and persuading them to buy into stock. His company then, due to poor mismanagement and poor equipment, end up collapsing in the first place. Everybody knows it was poorly mismanaged. Everybody knows that. But he didn't waste no time still hustling it to you, even though he knew for a fact it was being mismanaged poorly. He was still telling you to invest in it. Get out of here, man. It's a wrap. It's a wrap.